Hi, everyone. My name is Iri, and I'm going to be talking to you today about progressive web apps. So first of all, like I said, my name is Iri Aderonko. I'm a front-end developer from Lagos, Nigeria, currently living in the UK. I'm the co-founder of Helicarrier, which is a company building cryptocurrency infrastructure for Africa. And I'm just really passionate about the web. So like I'm a Google web expert, and that's basically what I'm going to be talking to you all today about the web and progressive web apps. So just as an introduction, before progressive web apps were introduced about 5, 6, maybe even 7 years ago at this point, the web was really lagging behind mobile applications. So websites had the advantage of being open and accessible to anyone, anywhere, but were really lacking in capabilities. And then we had native apps on the other hand, which were really great in terms of the capabilities. But compared to like web apps, they were poor in reach because they're closed off to a certain ecosystem. So progressive web apps were basically introduced to be the best of both worlds. So they're defined by this exact intersection. So they use modern web capabilities to deliver a user experience similar to native applications, but they also do this while maintaining the main benefit of the web, which is its reach and low barrier to entry. So there are 3 core features that make a progressive web app. So it's capable, reliable, and installable. So by capable, we mean that progressive web apps need to take advantage of modern APIs, which put it on the same footing as native applications. By reliable, we mean that progressive web apps should feel fast and dependable regardless of network connection. And in fact, progressive web apps should actually even take like an offline first approach. So they should even think of connection to the network as more of an enhancement and provide like a base experience that doesn't actually depend on being online. Then finally, progressive web apps should be installable. So meaning that they can be installed to the device as a like standalone application and then used outside of the browser. So, and tying all of these 3 concepts together is progressive enhancement. So progressive web apps are so called because at their core, they're applications built with progressive enhancement in mind. So what this just means is that none of the extra features should be implemented at the detriment to having that like core standard website experience that we've always had. So unfortunately, back in 2016, when progressive web apps were introduced, they didn't really live up to this dream that they were selling. So in order for progressive web apps to really rival native applications, there's some critical capabilities that are like really critical to have, and they were just missing. And then in terms of making progressive web apps reliable, service worker was also not widespread enough to be used reliably. And more so, service workers were also really difficult to use and integrate within an existing project. So I know so many people have had so much like headache over service workers in the past, and especially like getting it to update and all that's generally been pretty difficult to work with. And compatibility with frameworks was also another major issue. So a lot of progressive web apps ended up being complete rebuilds without sorry, I'm trying to move this out of the way, without like a framework being built because there wasn't really a straightforward or known way to make progressive web apps with the tools and frameworks that we were already using. And then in terms of being installable, the whole like add to home screen feature just wasn't really the same as install. So all it literally did was add websites to the home screen, and there wasn't really much deeper integration into the system than that. So across the board, progressive web apps couldn't really be considered capable, reliable, or installable. But so like where are we at now, like 5, 6-ish years on? So firstly, we've seen progressive web apps being used in a lot more cases today than ever before. So basically, every major application has a progressive web app, even though they're mostly in addition to like a native mobile application. They also at least have the progressive web app. And actually, an estimated like 1.5 million websites are considered to be installable as progressive web apps. And then there's like tens of millions of installations happening every single month on Chrome for Android alone. So let's look at like these 3 things. So how capable are progressive web apps today? So thanks to a web capabilities project that's codenamed Project Fugu, the answer is like a whole lot more capable. So Project Fugu is like a project with contributions from all the major browsers. And the aim of this project is essentially to close the gap in the web's capabilities. So let's look at a couple of those critical capabilities that I mentioned a bit earlier. So push notifications, background sync, access to device. So we'll start with push notifications and badging. So push notifications requires a few different parts because there are like a few different APIs that have been created to handle this feature as a whole. So we have the notifications API, which controls the permissions and display of a notification message. And we have the push API, which controls which allows the browser to receive push messages from a server. And then the app badging API, which controls the like actual badge on the application icon. So with these three APIs combined, we can provide that like native like experience. So I mean, this is going to be like a very practical talk. So I'm going to try and show some of these features and hopefully nothing will go wrong, even though things always go wrong when you try and like demo things in real life. So yeah, first of all, let me see if I can make this smaller. Okay. So I have this website. It's called, well, it was previously called Progressive Web Apps in 2021, because that's when I first made it. But it's basically just to demo all of the different things that we can do with Progressive Web Apps. So it just kind of shows, it's just like a very stripped down, it's not meant to be like a website you actually use. It's just more to show that you can do things. So I'll make this a bit bigger. So we're going to look at the install part first, or rather, sorry, the push notifications part first. So what we want in this case is to be able to detect when a user has the like permission on and off, and then like if not, request the permission and then actually like send a push notification to the device. So this is like the thing. I'm just gonna go here. So I've set up most of the code already. I'm just going to like walk through the main parts of this. So the first thing I'm doing is checking to see if there is actually the notification object in the window. So this is a thing that's really crucial for progressive enhancements. So like I said, if we're trying to add a new feature, we shouldn't do it in a way that it's going to actually break the experience for other people. So that's kind of why we always start with, okay, is this feature even there in the first place before we try and do anything? And then if it's not, we can like adapt the experience. So in this case, I'm just putting a paragraph that just says the feature not available. But obviously, if this was a real website, you could make this a bit more, I don't know, dynamic or a bit more like interesting. So the first thing is that we want to actually determine whether the user has already granted access or not, or determine what the access they have given. So the way that we do that is we are looking at this notification.permission thing. So it's actually going to return a string and it will tell us what the initial permission is. And with that, I'm passing it into this custom function that I created, which is called handle notification permission. So if we go up here, we'll see. So what we're doing is checking what the current permission is, and if permission is already granted, which it shouldn't be because we are just starting, we'll be able to like show other buttons. But let's say it isn't granted yet, then we want to be able to show a button that a user would click that will then pop up the actual permission thing so that they will be able to, or we can request the permission. So basically what should happen now is when I go back and I refresh, oh gosh, there's already a problem. I think it's my internet. Let's see. Yeah, great. So I just refreshed the page and you can see that the button now shows because we can tell that permission is not granted, right? So then the next thing we would want to do is actually handle what happens when a user clicks this button. So what we want is to request permission. So we'll see like a pop-up that will show, oh, do you want to allow notifications on this website or not? So to do that, I'm just gonna uncomment out this bit. So what I've now done is showing the button that we've just seen. And when the user clicks the button, what we want to do is this, which is basically notification.request permission. And then with that permission, I'm just calling back this function again, which will then check, okay, if permission is granted, show this. If it's not, show something else. So let's try again, refresh. So now when I click this, yeah, you should see that, oh, this website wants to show notifications. Do you block or do you allow? So we're going to allow. And then you can see that when I clicked allow, because the permission is granted, it then changes this button, which will actually allow us to like send a notification. So let's go back here. So yeah, so now the last part of it, which is to actually like show a notification. So this depends on service worker. So that's why we have to first check to see if service worker is ready. Let me make this a bit bigger to make it a bit more visible. So we're first checking that the service worker is ready. And then with the actual like registered service worker, we can then call show notification, which just says, hello, how are you doing? So one thing I do remember is that I have to turn off do not disturb so you can actually see the notification. So let's refresh and then send notification, and hopefully, no, it didn't go through. Let's see. I think it might be on the browser side. So I'm going to try this in Chrome because I think that was the issue the last time I tried to do this and had another issue. Okay, so let's do this. Not sure why it's so slow, just strange because it's just localhost. Refresh again. Just make sure there's no. Okay, 1 second. I think I'm going to change the port and see if that will solve the problem, because let's use 3000 instead. Okay, so okay, so that helps a bit. I'll probably go back to the other browser just in case, but let's just see if this works. So request permission, allow, and then send notification, and then it still didn't work. Oh boy, like I said, there's literally always a problem when you try and do things live. So let me see if notifications, refresh, or yeah, so I'm just using the dev tools to see whether the notification was actually displayed, and it says it was displayed. So I don't know, you'll have to, oh wait, it did display. I don't know why it didn't like actually pop up, but if you look in my notifications thing, you can see that it's actually like here. So for whatever reason it didn't pop up.
I think sometimes these notifications are hidden when using Zoom, if I'm not mistaken. I think that might be the default setting of Zoom. But yeah, maybe someone can confirm in the audience that somewhat happened to me.
Yeah, there's always an issue trying to test the actual notifications. I don't know why, but you can see that it's there, right? So I'm not making this up. It's actually there. So it worked, but it just didn't pop up because maybe I'm in Zoom. Maybe that's the reason. So that's that. Let me try and go back to this. So let me just go back. Okay, so that is that for just, you know, sending a notification. So let me go back here. Yeah, so that is just demoing the very basic like just sending a notification from the browser. So like what we've actually done is a bit like rudimentary and not necessarily how you would want to implement push notifications, because like I said, everything is kind of done in the browser, and that's notifications, but it's actually not like the push part of it, right? And to do that, we need a bit more setup. So we've already done like the first part, which is like, getting the permission from the user to send notifications to their device. Then what we now need to do is get what's called like a push subscription and send that to a server. So we have an identifier for the particular device. And then once the details are sent to the server, then we can now initiate like a web push protocol request. So sending the push message to the device. Unfortunately, like I don't really have time to show how to get all of that set up because it's a bit more now involves like the server, so it's a bit more like long, but I can show what it's like actually just receiving the notification in the service worker. So back to the code here. So let me just quickly show the service worker. Remove that. Yeah, so this is the service worker file. We'll show some of the other parts of this here, but I'm just going to go to the push events. Yeah, so what we can see here is that when the service worker receives a push event, we are checking to see what data we get from the events. So it might include some text, or if not, I just say hi there. And then when we get that event, we then show the notification. So we do it in a very similar way to the way we do it like on the client side, but this is just a way to respond to the actual like push from a server, which is mostly what you actually want notifications to do. So that's basically how it works. And because, like I said, I don't have time to show actual something coming from the server, I can't really demo this, but you can see that it's basically the same API that we're using here to actually show the notification, both in the service worker and in the actual like browser JavaScript file. So yeah, that's it for the push notification. So just a quick look at the browser support. So Web Notifications API has been around for quite a while. So it's actually one of those APIs that even predates the whole Project Fugu thing. So the support is pretty decent, even though it's still missing a major market in iOS Safari. But, and then also Push API, pretty decent and very similar. I put an asterisk next to Desktop Safari because it does support a form of push notifications, but it's just not the web standard. It's like a custom implementation. And yeah, just kind of a side note, if you want to know how to implement push notifications on Mac OS, this is a really great like video from a WWDC event that just outlines how to do that. So the next API that I want to demo is the app badging API. So let's see how that works. So let me go into move that. Okay, so the app badging one. So this one is comparatively pretty simple. So the entire API for like app badging, which is like I mentioned, so basically similar to how like you might have like a little red dot next to your, I don't know, Twitter for all your notifications. That's kind of what we're trying to replicate here. So they basically just have two APIs. So one is to set app badge. So you can, what I'm doing here is just actually finding like a random number and then calling navigator.set app badge to that number. Obviously in real life, you want to set it to a number that's meaningful, not just a random number, but basically this is how you do it. And then if you wanted to clear the app badge, you would use navigator.clear app badge. So I'm gonna show you how to do that here. Let me go. So for this particular API, you actually have to have the application installed. So let me refresh to change the port here. Then I'll just quickly add the application to my desktop. So if you can see here in my doc, you can see that I have like the PWA in 2021, even though we're in 2022 now, but you can see that I have the actual thing here. So if I go to the app badge, I have these two. So one is set app badge. So if I click on it, you can see, I mean, it might be a little bit small, but maybe you can see that there's like a number 17 there. So that's me just setting the app badge to a random number. Or I can also do clear app badge. So now it's completely clear. So that's basically it for that API. It's like comparatively really simple to basically any other web API. Okay, I'm going to close that and oops, oh yeah, let me go back to 3000. Okay, great. So back to my slides. Yeah, so for this API, the support is still quite limited because it is quite a new API. It's largely just supported in Chromium-based browsers. So another critical feature for progressive web apps to be capable revolves around the web's access to the device itself. So there are so many APIs related to this, but I'm going to focus on these three because they are some of the most like popular and requested by developers. So with the contact picker API, so a progressive web app can have access to contacts on your device. So I can't really demo this because it's something that will only work on a mobile device. It doesn't work on desktop, but this is basically how it works. So if the feature is available, so again, doing the feature check first, we can select certain data from the contacts on the device. So we can choose to pull the name, email, phone number, the image of all the contacts if we wanted to. So like I said, mobile only features, so it's not available on any of like the desktop versions of these browsers. But that said, I think support is pretty, I don't know, average, I guess. So then the web share API. So this allows us to share data from our progressive web apps to other applications. So again, if the feature is available, we can share things like links, files, and images from our progressive web app to any other application. And then on the flip side, a progressive web app can be like the target of shares from other applications. So we can set our web app to be an option when you're sharing certain types of data from other apps. So we do this in just the web app manifest. So we can add this share target objects. And in this example, we're allowing the app to accept basic data like links and text, but we can also set it up to be able to accept more complex things like images and other media. So again, when the data is received, we can just basically choose to handle it however we want. So in this case, I'm just displaying what the things are. And then the support for the web share API, so sharing data from our progressive web app to other apps, I feel like is pretty good. For the other side, so the web share target, the support isn't really as clear. We know that it is supported in Chrome and Edge, and it's not yet supported in Safari, but not so sure about other browsers yet. And then finally, we have the file system access API. So this grants us access to read and save changes directly to local files on the user's device. So we can do things like editing and saving files. So I'm going to do a quick demo of this. Let's see. So let me close some of this stuff. So going back here, file system access is what we want to do. So let me close this one and go to file system access. So this one is a bit more complicated, but I'll just kind of walk through. So again, I'm checking if, show open file picker is in the window. Again, the feature detection. And then I'm just like creating aliases for some of these elements that we're going to be working with. But basically, the first thing we want to do is showing the file picker. So basically, when a user, if I go back to here, clicks open file, you want to be able to see that box that allows you to show or to pick what type of file that you want. So that's basically what this does. And you have a few different options here. So for example, I only want to allow a person to pick one thing, so they can't pick multiple. And I'm also defining what types of files that I want to accept. Like I only want to have like text files. I don't want to be able to open an image, for example. And then I'm going to uncomment out this bit. So what I'm doing with that is when I've like actually gotten that file, I'm going to put it into a text area that I've created. So let me just show you how that would work. So refresh, file system access, open file. hold on, let me go back. Show file picker. Maybe I need to refresh this properly. Yeah, okay, so it's taking me to, let me just go to like so many different things. Okay, text file, right? So you can see that like it basically says that I open a text file and I put in the contents here. So I can basically edit this and say, hey there, or I don't know. And then what I now want to be able to do is save that file. So I'm going to go back again and show how that works. So when a person clicks on the save file button, I'm going to uncomment this out. And basically what we're doing is creating a writable and then writing to that file and then just closing that. So you don't necessarily need to understand the details of this. You just kind of need to know that these are the steps that you need to take to save the file. So let me go back again. Okay, I've saved this, refresh, and then actually do this again because text file. So I'm just gonna say, hey there, and then save the file. And you can see that I ask for permission. So this is one of the key things that is really important for APIs like this, in that you shouldn't be able to just actually edit things on a person's device without actually first asking for permission. So that's something that happens automatically. Like we as developers don't need to like request permission or anything. As long as we're using the APIs, the browser will then determine whether it's needed or not. So click Save Changes. And then what's cool is that if I were to open the file again, you'll see that it has changed. So I've actually saved back to that file. So let me go back here. Yeah, so that is the File System Access API. So this is a really, really new API, so support is very limited. And also because of the potential security issues around this, browsers are going to be a lot more slow to adopt it because they have to be very careful to do it in the right way. So as I mentioned, there have been so many APIs shipped by the Fugu project, and I couldn't obviously get into all of them today, but I definitely suggest that you check them out on this Fugu API tracker website so you can actually know what all the newer APIs are. So summary on web capabilities. So as we've seen, like a lot of progress has been made. So however, not all platforms have made that progress equally. So I think we're generally still in a much better place. So that's why I kind of give it a half-ish smile. So next, how reliable are progressive web apps today? So how much can we ensure that a progressive web app can exist and function well independent of network? So as you can see, we're in a much better position with support of service workers today than we were like 5 years ago. So essentially every browser that is going to support service workers and should support them already does. And we also have a lot better tools for developing service workers. So most browsers now allow us to more easily see and debug the whole service worker and its life cycle. So we have like a lot better visibility into the different events that a service worker is tuned into so we can simulate them. And one of the greatest improvements to the experience of writing service worker code is the introduction of tools like Workbox. So this is a really great library that provides like easier ways of doing the common tasks that we all need service workers to do. So they also provide like a set of recipes to do the most common things. So we don't necessarily have to like rewrite a lot of the like boilerplate code from scratch ourselves. So I'm going to just show like a few different things that we can do with service worker. So I go back to my service worker file. So the first one I'm going to show is the offline Google Analytics. So it's kind of hard to actually demo it, but I am just going to, I guess, explain to you what it does. So all you have to do is import this Google Analytics library. And as long as in your actual like HTML file, there is Google Analytics imported there, if a user was to visit the page when they're offline, this offline Google Analytics will still capture that. And then when they come back online, it will then send that information to your Google Analytics. So all of that happens for you. You literally don't have to do anything besides just say Google Analytics.initialize. So that's really awesome. Then the next thing I wanted to show was, caching static assets. So one of the great things that you can do with Service Worker is caching stuff like your CSS files or your images or your font files or script files. And you can cache it so that it's being stored locally. So if a user is offline, they'll still be able to have access to all of these assets. So that's what you can do with this. So I don't know if you've worked with Service Worker before, but basically trying to replicate these like 4 or 5 lines of code without Workbox will probably take you like 20 lines of code or something. And it's just a lot more convoluted to do by yourself. But Workbox sort of just abstracts all of that for you. And it basically allows you to say something like, oh, if we're making a request for a script or a style, then you can use this method, which is called stale while revalidate, which just means that you first like get what is in the cache. So that's what's like the quote unquote stale assets. But then in the background, you then go to the network if it's available and actually fetch that asset. And then you can update what is in your cache. So it's having the benefit of both. You're keeping everything up to date while still serving things as quickly as possible and serving things even offline. So that's basically the same thing that is being done here. So this is for your Google Fonts. So now you can actually use stuff like custom fonts without having to worry about it being detrimental to the performance of your website. And I think, the offline page is the other one I was going to show. And then I'll actually show how it all works together. So this is obviously a bit more code, but just to kind of like walk you through what it is. So what we're doing is we're registering a route. So basically whenever there is a navigation route, and that is like separate to like a request for a static asset, it's like you're trying to request for a page essentially. So what that does is it's passing it to this navigation handler. And what that is doing is that it will first try to go to the network, and then if not, we're going to serve like an offline page instead. And what that is a page that we have cached up here in your install. But that's not that relevant to this. It's basically just to say that there is an offline page that you can serve when you're offline. So that allows you to have something, even if a user is offline, like I said, looking at access to the network as more of an enhancement. So providing something for a user who might be offline for whatever reason. So now that I've uncommented that out, I am going to try and do one thing. So I'm going to run Webpack. Oh no, I haven't actually installed this. Oh gosh. Let's see if this is going to work live. Okay, let's try and run Webpack. Let me see. Let's see if this will work. Okay, so we'll test and see. If it doesn't work, then I don't know what to say, because doing Service Worker stuff live is difficult, but we'll see. So I refreshed, and I'm going to try to check to see that I actually have a Service Worker that is there. So I'm checking here, you can see, okay, yeah, there's a service worker that's activated and running. So now I'm going to make us go offline and refresh again. And yeah, it didn't work. Let's see. Looks like there might be a problem with, yeah, it does say that it's registered. If this doesn't work, maybe I'll try the actual live site and see. No, okay, let me try this one. So let's see. So this is the one that I've actually published, so maybe it will work. If it doesn't, you just have to, I guess, take my word for it again, but let's see. So let's say we are offline and refresh. Okay, yeah, you can see it worked. Don't know why the local one didn't work, but you can see that it works on the live website. So basically you can see that this is the offline page. It's basically just like a text page that says you're offline. But the key thing here, oops, I went back, refresh. But the key thing to note here is that you can see that the font is still loaded and the styles are still loaded. And that's because the Google Fonts file and the CSS file have been cached, and they can be served without the network. And then if I wanted to go back online, everything will come back as normal. I don't know why it's not coming back online, but yeah, I'm just gonna close that and go back to the slides. Okay, so that's it for like the Workbox demo. So another thing is that in terms of like integration with frameworks, we're also in a much better position today. So basically every major framework now has some form of support for progressive web apps and like offline first. So if you use Angular, they have this guide on how to implement the whole app shell model. We also have similar guides for React and also for Vue. So I would say in terms of reliability, progressive web apps are definitely doing very well. So the support for the tools needed, like Service Worker, are widespread enough that we can generally expect it to be supported for most of our users. And then also the experience of developing Service Workers have really improved to the point where it's more accessible to more developers. So finally, are progressive web apps now installable? So again, like as you've seen, almost all major browsers, particularly on mobile, have some support for the add to home screen feature or are working towards it. So, and even though like they're not all the same, so for example, it's a bit different on like Safari or iOS than it is on Chrome, but they basically just all have some form of progressive web app install available. And we also now have better control over the whole install flow instead of being something that's like wholly controlled by the browser. So I'm going to quickly show the a like custom installation flow that we can do now. So first, I'm going to change the, whoops, do it on 2000 because so that we can try the whole install thing again. So I'm going to close this, close this, close this. So the thing about the install flow is, I mean, as we saw a bit earlier, when I actually just went straight to the browser, hold on, let me go back again. Yeah, so you saw a bit earlier when I basically just went here and I just clicked to install. So that's a way that you can do it directly with the browser. But also as developers, we can provide a more custom flow within the application itself. So not just like in the browser. So that's what this section is all about. So basically what we want to do is first detect if a progressive web app can even be installed. And we can do that now with this new event, which is like called before install prompt. And what we can then do is prevent the browser from just like popping that up, because sometimes the browser will actually just pop up and say, oh, you can install it now, but you don't necessarily want that to be the first thing that happens when a user comes to the site. So what we should do is prevent that default and then, save it for later, and then show our own custom install button. So if I go back here and I refresh and I do this, we should see our own custom install button. Like I said, this is very basic. Obviously, in whatever website you might be working on, you can create something a little bit more elaborate and have a whole onboarding flow. But this is basically just a way to control that. And then what we want is that when the user clicks that install button, that we actually show the proper install prompt. So all we're doing is calling install prompt.prompt. And then after that, based on the outcome, so assuming the user actually accepts, so if the outcome is accepted, then we're hiding away the install button because they've already done that. And this is just basically some cleanup so that after the app has been installed, there's another hook that we can, or another event that we can hook into to customize other things. So in this example, I'm just adding some text that says install was successful. So let me go back, let me do this because that's usually better. So refresh again, and then I'm just going to click the install. And you see that it pops up and asks me from the browser, do I want to install? And I click install, and then you can see that it's now outside of the browser. This is the actual like application itself. And then it has this install successful text that I added just at the end to like clean up or round up the whole process. So that's basically, like I said, a pretty basic example, but just a way or an example to show you what you can kind of hook into to really customize the whole installation flow. So yeah, that's it for that. So we are really getting closer and closer to the whole like add to home screen really being installed. I mean, although we're not exactly near that, we're seeing like a lot of incremental improvements leading us towards that state. So for example, in 2018, I think Microsoft was like the first platform to allow progressive web apps to be installed through the native application store. So using this like PWA builder website, you can just enter the URL to your progressive web app, and then you can get the packages that you need to upload it to like the Windows Store or the Android Store or anything that accepts it. And as a side note, this is also a really great site for just building a progressive web app and getting feedback on what you can do to improve. So generally great site. So also on Android, we also have a concept of web APKs. So this is essentially like a native application package created entirely from a progressive web app. So this is done automatically when a user clicks on add to home screen. So it doesn't actually require anything extra from us as like the developers of the progressive web app. And we even get like a lot of out of like a progressive web app being packaged as a web APK. So it's displayed in the app drawer along with the other native applications. It also has this like app info page, so the same way other native applications do. So there's even like a central and like standardized ways to handle settings. And we also even have these like intent filters, so which will allow like links from the website, the domain, to be opened in the application itself instead of the browser. So basically with web APKs, a progressive web app is basically very close to being treated like any other Android application. So I would say in terms of installability, progressive web apps have also made a lot of progress. So, but like with capabilities, just because not all the platforms have made that progress equally, like Android is significantly ahead of iOS again. But I would say on a whole, we're like in a much better position. So like what's next for progressive web apps? So where do we want to be in say like another 5 or 6 years? So obviously the goal is to get to a state where progressive web apps can be truly, capable, reliable, and installable, even to the extent that they exceed native applications. To get there, we still need to do more progress with capabilities. So there's like a lot of features currently in the pipeline that should keep moving progressive web apps closer and closer to feature parity with native applications. These are just some of the APIs that I'm personally really excited about and are already in development or under consideration. However, like a bit of a theme, obviously, is that the web is not the same everywhere. So the web on Android and Microsoft is very much ahead the web on iOS. And we really just need to be careful not to end up in a situation where the web suffers from the same issues as native applications. Because the reason progressive web apps are the best of both worlds is because they still have that reach of the web. So if there becomes a divide between how the web performs depending on platform, then it's like basically no difference to native applications. So, okay, I missed one slide, but basically it was just that we basically just need the web to be the same web everywhere. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for this really interesting talk. I guess it was really, really cool to have this in a hands-on fashion instead of just learning the theory, including all the stuff that did not work when doing it live. So I think that's just how it is. So yeah. Is there anyone who has some urgent questions and wants to unmute yourself before we jump into the Slido Q&A? I mean, you can also do that later and just interrupt me. But if that's not the case for now, I will just share the Slido questions. So I hope you can see my screen. Hope that works for you. So the most upvoted question is, would you share your code with us? Maybe the most interesting question of today.
Yes, definitely. I will, let me actually just get the link on GitHub and I will share that right now.
Perfect. Awesome. I mean, otherwise you can also share it with us and we can distribute it to the participants as you wish.
Sorry, what did you say?
You can also share the link with us and then we forward it to the participants if that's more convenient for you.
Yeah. I'm dropping in the chat now. It's like close to me, but yeah.
All right, perfect. Cool. So I think there is a related question or a comment. So this one exactly, is it harder to debug progressive web apps? I think this was the moment when we discussed about this notification stuff and maybe having some issues with Zoom and so on. So I think it's a general code related question.
I don't think I guess it depends on what you're comparing it to, right? Because progressive web apps have a lot more features. So I guess it would be more difficult to debug just because there's like so much more. And I think also working with the service worker can be a bit difficult. But like I mentioned, there's now a lot in dev tools that we can use to, sorry, I'm just seeing that people are saying that it's private. I'll make it public in a second. But yeah, there's now in dev tools, a lot more tools that we can use to really debug things like that. So for example, the fact that I was able to go and see that the notification actually was there, it's just that I couldn't see it. So that helps a lot because then you know that, oh, the issue wasn't actually my code. It was just that maybe there was an issue with like the permissions or something like that.
All right, yeah, that totally makes sense. So is there still an issue with the repository? But probably we can fix that afterwards, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty simple to do. So I'm gonna just make it public now, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's public now, so.
Perfect. All right, I think there is a related question. Which framework would you recommend? The person mentioned that maybe he or she missed that part. So what do you recommend? Do you have any specific starting point, any material to get started with that topic?
I mean, progressive web apps in themselves aren't something that would have like a framework for progressive web apps. Like I mentioned, whatever framework that you're currently using probably will have some like related capability related to progressive web apps. So I mentioned Angular, Vue, and React. They all have like guides on how to take advantage of progressive web apps. So I think whatever framework you're currently comfortable with using, it's not something that should be that you need to switch to a whole new framework to do progressive web apps. No, it just works with basically whatever you're currently using.
That might be even a good choice to build up on what you already learned. So not trying to learn one specific new framework if you're familiar maybe with React or Angular anyway, and you can extend your knowledge with the specific PWA stuff. So that might be a better choice anyway, right?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Okay, there is one additional question in the Zoom chat. Should we expect all these APIs to be included in the next ECMAScript spec release to reduce the gap between the vendors?
No, not really, because it is basically something that has to be implemented by each browser. Like, for example, with the file system access thing, like it's basically just a web API. So it's not something that can be implemented in ECMAScript. It has to be implemented in each particular browser.
All right. I think there are 2 or 3 related questions regarding the more high-level topic. So is the main use case for progressive web apps more desktop applications or more in terms of mobile application? What do you think?
I would say it's actually mostly mobile, but because of new features, again, like file system access, that's something that's only on desktop at the moment. So there are APIs for one or the other, but I would say that what has driven progressive web apps more has been trying to compete with mobile native applications. So I think that's why we see a lot more features that are related to mobile, like the contacts API and things like that, or even like the share API to be able to share from your progressive web app to another app or the other way around. That's all like a mobile concept, or it's like mobile use that really made that a thing as much.
Right, I think, let me check. There is one question that adds on top of that. What are the reasons then to develop native apps? I mean, you just mentioned the focus is definitely on mobile, but is there any reason when big companies or whatever person, company really needs to go for an iOS, Android specific native application instead of PWA?
Yeah, so I would say at the moment, in terms of capabilities, I think most things that people want to do, they can actually do on the web. It's just that a lot of people don't know that they can do it on the web. So they just think that, oh, if they want to do something to do with push notifications, that they have to make a mobile app. But actually, you don't have to make a mobile app. You can actually do the web. So I think on the developer side, but also on the user side, because users aren't as used to doing all these things on the web. So we need to really change that mindset and let people know that, oh, you can actually do all these things in the web. But obviously there are also some cases that we don't have the feature for it yet. So maybe you do need a progressive web app. But one thing that I didn't really mention in the talk was on Android, we also have something called like trusted web activities, which basically allows you to create a combination. So where some pages of your application would be native Android code, but other pages of your application might be a progressive web app. And in that way, you can kind of leverage the pros and cons of both, or the pros of both rather.
Oh, that's interesting, I guess. So you can still have one common code base for writing it or for building the PWA be used in Android and iOS, but you can still include some native parts, which is to fill the gap. Yeah. Okay, I think that's pretty interesting. Cool. But still, are there any issues that can arise with iOS specific things like accessing the camera, or I don't know, any other pitfalls that you really can't manage with PWAs? The things like you mentioned permissions and stuff, but is there anything that really don't work in that cross-platform way?
Yeah, definitely. I think even some of the ones that I've shown today are not available on all like devices yet, right? So I think like even though we're really getting to a point where we're like having all these features, we need to get to a point where they're available on all browsers everywhere. So I don't think we've really crossed that threshold. So you need to basically look at whatever you're trying to build, and then you need to like do the research to know, okay, is this a feature that is fully available on the web so you can use, or maybe it's not.
So what do you suggest to maybe think about what you expect, or what features that you expect in your application, and then decide for going for like a traditional web framework and moving it over, or leveraging the PWA stuff, or going for a native iOS, Android stuff? Is that an approach that is usual in practice, or is it just more, I don't know, you realize when doing the project?
No, I would say that it should definitely be more of you do the research beforehand and then you decide on what you're going to do. Like, for example, in my company, we have a sort of similar combination in that like most of our application is actually web-based, but we have like a React Native application so that we can take advantage of some of the features that are not available only on the web. So we also do that like hybrid approach. But for most of our website, it doesn't need to be like native code. So we do it on the web.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, I guess. So, and also makes it more scalable, in my opinion. So otherwise you don't have the full flexibility, I guess. All right, then I think there is one last question for all those people who want to really get started with the PWAs. So do you have any suggestions, or can you explain how uploading, making PWAs available in Google Play and App Store works? Is that super complex, or is it even possible as of now?
No, it's actually pretty simple. And I would recommend the PWA Builder website. I'll drop the link in the chat, because all you have to do is put in the URL to your website, and then it will give you all the packages that you need for the stores that accept them. So for the App Store, it doesn't yet accept progressive web apps, but the Google Play Store does, the Microsoft Store does, Samsung Store does. I think there's one other one, Firefox does. So I would say, let me see if I can quickly get it, pwabuilder.com. Yeah, that's it. So it is actually pretty simple to do it that way. And on the website, they also even have instructions for what you need to do on the various like App Store websites in order to like, create your app and do all those other things. So highly recommend pwabuilder.com.
Great. So this is not a mission critical thing. So this will not stop you from building an app.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Cool. So it's more like a side note. You just need to do it in the end, but it's not super complex.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. All right, then 2 more questions popping in. So how much is the effort to migrate from web or native frameworks to PWA?
I mean, from web to PWA isn't going to be very difficult at all, because it's the same code base, right? And it's just like adding more features on top. If you're already having a native application, it will be more difficult because you're having to essentially rewrite your entire application in a different language, probably, assuming like you're writing Swift or something for iOS, you're going to have to write JavaScript for your progressive web app. But you can also take the approach of having the combination based on the, I guess, specifics of what your web app or your native application is, rather. Maybe you can take the approach of, just slowly changing some pages so that it's not something that you have to like write the entire thing. But that really depends on, like I said, the specifics of your native application. So I can't say for sure if that's an option to you.
Okay, and there is one question especially for the long run. Could you confirm if the idea is to make the platform independent from mobile development? Is that true?
Yes, exactly. So basically, to be able to write something for the web and it will work on any platform, including mobile platforms.
All right, then I think that's it regarding the questions from Slido. Is there anyone who wants to unmute yourself? Any remaining questions? I mean, if that's not the case, then thank you very much to you, Ire, for being with us, for sharing your hands-on experience. I think that's super helpful to not only have theory and stuff, but learning how this really works in general, and to motivate people to go for PWAs. So thank you very much for being with us. And to all of you, the people out there, thanks for joining. We will have some upcoming event next week. So there will be a discussion and talk with exactly for speakers for discussing female tech stuff. So It's especially about women in tech sharing their success stories and their experience basically. So I think will be super cool. We will share that in probably tomorrow on our social media. So yeah, stay tuned, and I hope some of you will join these events as well. All right, then that's it, I guess. Have a nice evening. Thanks for joining, and hopefully see you next week. Goodbye.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Bye.